There are concerns today about more unrest in the Middle East after Israeli airstrikes on Iran. The target, Iran's nuclear facilities, more than 200 fighter jets targeted over 100 sites. And as you heard, Iran has now also launched missiles in retaliation. For more on this, let's go to Andrew Bishop, Senior Partner and Global Head of Policy Research at Signum Global Advisors. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we know Iran has launched missiles now directly at Israel in response. It's unclear how much damage has been done so far. Do you expect even more retaliation from Iran?
I do. I think we're going to see volley after volley of these types of attacks. Overall, approximately 200 missiles have been launched today by Iran. I expect we could expect, another 100 or so today and more over the coming days. Approximately 1/10 of those, by the way, get through Israel's air defense systems. So you can imagine the potential impact.
Why do you seem so certain that there will be another volley and perhaps more after that?
So I think the Iranian regime really needs to show that it has inflicted a sort of countermeasure or counter pain on Israel following yesterday's and the overnight attacks. Just from a pure domestic politics standpoint, the attacks that Israel conducted, without getting into their legitimacy or lack thereof, that's a separate issue, have created substantial damage in downtown Tehran, for example. And that's something that I think the leadership in Iran really needs to show its response to.
Okay, so senior security military officials were taken out by the initial strikes by Israel. I'm wondering how much it'll hamper the ability for Iran to respond, and are there others that easily replace the ones who were lost?
So the answer is it does and did hamper Iran's ability to respond meaningfully, which is in fact the reason why it took Iran, over, I'd say about 18 hours or so to respond. That was the main impact. At this stage, I think that the Iranian leadership and its military probably have their legs under them.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other things. One is the U.S. is now pushing Iran to accept a deal to limit its nuclear efforts. They've been trying to get to some sort of agreement. They haven't done it. Is now the right time for the U.S. to be pushing on this, or do you think it'll only force Iran to dig in further?
So I think from the Israeli perspective, there's probably an appetite to push Iran or kick it while it's down and really push the regime to its fundamental collapse, given the vulnerability that it's in currently. From the U.S. position, however, or from President Trump's position, I think there's a real appetite to get this wrapped up as part of a deal. The U.S. and Israel have the upper hand, but there are diminishing returns for President Trump, right? The longer oil prices stay up, the higher the risk that Iran conducts strikes on Israeli civilians and so on and so forth. Those things could really turn sour. So I do think that President Trump is in a pretty strong position to actually impose a deal on Iran in the coming days.
Is it your feeling that the U.S. is calling the shots for Israel, or that Israel is acting on its own with American consent?
Definitely the latter. There's no question that the U.S. was aware that this was coming, was given a heads up, and probably even facilitated the strike from a logistical and intelligence perspective. However, from a political standpoint, I genuinely think that President Trump would have preferred to do without this. Again, huge liabilities for him. And so if there's a window for de-escalation, I suspect that that's one that he will not only take himself, but also pressure Israel to agree to.
The U.S. and Israel obviously have the upper hand in weaponry and military compared to Iran. I'm wondering what the response to this latest retaliation by Iran will look like from Israel. How quickly could we expect that, and what does that look like? They hit nuclear facilities first. We don't know how much damage has been done, but would they be the target again, or would it be wider?
So there are definitely more targets on the nuclear side on Israel's sort of list of actions to take. So that's coming for sure. Separately from that, I think that the latest attacks on Tel Aviv in particular by Iran will lead Israel to really take the fight to Iran's political leadership and not just its military and scientific leadership. And this will be a form of escalation. What this does not do, however, is I don't think it will lead Israel to attack Iran's oil production or export facilities.
Okay, because of course, some were concerned about the oil supply and degradation of that oil supply as a result. Do you expect other players in the Middle East to get involved here?
Only in a constructive sense. I don't expect anyone to get involved from a sort of military or kinetic standpoint. It's very telling that Hezbollah chose to stay out of this. The Iraqi militias are probably on the fence. They will eventually conduct some degree of strike on U.S. military bases, but probably nothing out of the ordinary in terms of scale and magnitude. And we know that the Houthis have already been trying to strike Israel. The problem for them is they're so far away and their capabilities are relatively limited. So again, I don't expect more than quote unquote business as usual from those actors.
Do you see this being then prolonged, or do you think this is going to be very quickly resolved one way or the other?
I would lean towards quickly resolved as long as we're talking in days rather than hours. So my point being, I don't think this is going to be a matter of weeks. I think it's going to be a matter of days, but that could be, you know, mid next week as opposed to Saturday night, right? That's how I would think about it.
And just out of curiosity, do you think that Iran would expand its attacks to involve American assets that they can reach?
I don't actually. This is a threat that Iran has actually laid out publicly. So officially, and in terms of their stated intentions, they are quote unquote planning to do this. But I'm skeptical, and the reason for that is that they are aware that the U.S. could really hurt them quite badly. Frankly, more so even than Israel has. And ironically, the U.S. is the only thing quote unquote protecting Iran's leadership from Israeli actions. So I think Iran is going to think twice before attacking the U.S. outside of Iraq. Iraq is a bit of a different case given the proliferation of attacks there, even on a usual basis.